Welcome back, my friends, to the D-Rate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. Each week, I'm sharing stories from my path and using the power of conversation and collaboration with my many great guests. Together, we chart a course toward understanding, bridging divides, and fostering a community where wisdom prevails over discord. Friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. The only good thing about a bad attitude is we have the ability as individuals to change it. For me, it starts with gratitude and personal accountability. I am so incredibly grateful that you have taken the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Please remember to subscribe and share the DTH podcast with your network of friends. If you would like to support the show, check out the Support Us page on the D-Rate the Hate website. With that, my friends, let's get to it. In this episode, I am joined by my friend Corey Nathan to discuss the importance of having conversations about politics and religion without resorting to personal attacks. Corey is a fellow podcaster whose show is focused on the topic. In this conversation, we emphasize the need to approach these conversations with openness and curiosity, seeking to understand the other person's perspective rather than trying to convince them to change their beliefs. We also discuss the dangers of confirmation bias and echo chambers and the importance of separating a person's identity from their political or religious positions. The conversation continuously highlights the power of active listening and reflecting back, as well as the value of recognizing our common humanity in order to foster meaningful and respectful dialogue. This conversation covers a lot of ground. Some additional highlighted topics you'll find within this conversation are the importance of engaging in conversations with enraged individuals and the need to make them feel heard and valued, the dangers of identitarianism and the negative impact of pigeonholing and preconceived notions, the power of fair criticism, along with the importance of recognizing each other's humanity, and the emphasis that not every conversation needs to be a contest and that prioritizing the relationship over debate can lead to a better understanding. Friends, stick around for another incredible DTH conversation with my friend Corey Nathan. You're not going to want to miss it. Here we go. Corey Nathan, thank you for joining me on the D-Rate the Hate podcast, my friend. So good to see you.
Yeah, thanks, Wilk. I really appreciate you including me in a conversation. This is all. I've been listening to you for a while now, so seeing your face and getting to talk to you directly is a real treat. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely a treat to have you here, Corey, and it's always good to talk to another podcaster, somebody who's been doing this for a while, and then the idea of having somebody that is doing a lot of similar work, to what I do, in the depolarization space, and so the fellow podcaster depolarization. I've got no doubt, Corey, we're going to have a fantastic conversation here today. So why don't we dive right in and just first of all, I'm gonna talk about your podcast, the Talking Politics and Religion Without Killing Each Other podcast. It's funny because I talk, and a lot of people have heard me talk, Corey, about the fact that I probably spent more time in bars over the course of my life than I did in classrooms, and there's that old cliche, right, where you can't talk. There's two places you can't talk politics and religion. That's in a bar or at the kitchen table, and I think that's truly a mistake. I think, and I think probably it's becoming. I don't know. It's like a double-edged sword for me, and I want to get your take on this because so many people have taken their political identity and made it so solid to their core identity, which I don't think is good. And then there's people that have taken their religion that used to be such a core identity part of people, but now religion's on the downswing. Politics is on the upswing. I think it should be just the opposite, and it's just so ugly. So let's start there. Talking politics and religion without killing each other. Corey Nathan, let's start there, and See where this goes.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, I think you're right, man. I think you're onto something. If we're not talking about politics and religion, what are we talking about? I mean, I love talking about the Mets. I love talking about sports. I love talking about the weather, things that are connectors that, are relatively innocuous. Well, sports sometimes can get pretty heated, but, but politics and religion is how we live together, how we live among each other, how we figure out how to navigate our differences with each other. Right. So I do think you're right that a lot of folks have made their politics their religion. So there's that. But I also think that there is a tendency to want to make it a contest, to want to make it a battle right out of the gate. Like I said, like if we're not talking about politics and religion, we're not talking about how we live among each other, but if you're coming at it with the intent to clobber somebody over the head until they submit to you or agree with you, it's not going to go well. And I think that's just the default. Like a lot of people just kind of default into that posture, whether you're at a bar or whether you're at a friend's house, whether you're around a poker table, when things like this come up, that's a lot of times how we enter into it. So I think if we can simply, they say the first step is just admitting it. If we can simply acknowledge that that's what we're doing, that's our proclivity, I think it'd go a long way to maybe shifting gears a little bit. And that is like, I don't want to enter into a conversation assuming that I'm going to convince anybody to make a 180-degree turn on anything, whether it's going Trump to Biden or on a particular issue, immigration, Ukraine, whatever, because I'm not. The truth is, no matter how effective of a debater you are, you're not convincing anybody. You're just good at throwing rhetorical grenades at somebody. Whereas if my goal, it's like Monty Guzman, you're part of Braver Angels, an organization I love, and Monty in there, her book, I never thought of it that way. So I always refer to that. I always refer to it and try to even if it's just in my mind, entering into a conversation with the hopes that maybe they'll say one thing that'll be like, huh, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way, Yeah. And what that does is it's a good way to enter into a conversation that nurtures a relationship. We learn about each other. That is a doable goal, as opposed to, or the other thing, that Braver Angels espouses is instead of you saying somebody says something that I should completely disagree with, and instead of me trying to convince them otherwise, maybe that radical curiosity of that's interesting. I that's certainly not what I believe. That's not how I feel about that, whatever it might be. How did you arrive at that conclusion? Tell me about you, your story. You clearly feel strongly about it. What in your life, got you to that point where you feel that strongly about whatever it is, immigration or abortion or whatever? Because then you're talking to a person and you're hearing about them and their story, as opposed to, two monkeys throwing crap at each other from across the bar.
Oh, that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And so much of what you said, obviously, people know about me and the work that I've done with Braver Angels and Moni Guzman, incredible friend of mine. We've been on stage together a few times, had a number of great conversations with each other, despite the fact that we do differ greatly politically, but we've had, we have been able to have those conversations because we don't basically dive into the other's identity and go in for the attack based on that identity or whatever. Even though we have a different position on a particular topic, we can have that conversation. And like you said, or I know, when we think about, common friends of ours, like, Jonathan Rauch or David Brooks and people like that, they talk about, when you're having those conversations, lead that person into, say, what is it about your life experience that has brought you to see things this way? And when you open that person up for that storytelling, that really does a lot to lower their defenses, because you don't want to, and I don't want to, in a lot of the conversations that I'm having, it's not that I'm looking to to change somebody's mind. I mean, you look at, we talked in the pre-show, Corey, briefly about my relationship with Dr. Francis Collins. Now, we differ immensely on our positions on the government's response to the pandemic, right? But we have been able to develop a friendship and have conversations about those seriously contentious topics and do so in a very civil way. If we do not work through our differences with people that we agree with and prove that we have the ability to speak on contentious topics without slinging mud and just filling that space with disdain, because all you end up doing then is talking past each other.
Yeah. I think that's important. The work that you've done with Dr. Collins, because somebody in that position can easily fall into the trap of what I heard David French refer to as bespoke realities, right? Like when we saw the presidents of 3 very prominent universities in front of Congress, being asked a very simple question about anti-Semitism right after October, a couple months after October 7th. And they didn't seem to have the language to say anti-Semitism is wrong, right? They couldn't figure out like how to navigate that without this like rehearsed legalistic sounding answer. Why? Because they're only hanging out with people that agree with them, right? I'm not saying that's necessarily the case with each of those college presidents, but a lot of times that's what we do. We only watch certain programs. We only listen to certain podcasts. We only talk to people who agree with us. That's a bespoke reality. Whereas you gave Dr. Collins a gift, because perhaps I've heard him in interviews subsequently where he's been able to say, if I had it to do over again, I think we would have done X, Y, and Z, as opposed to digging his heels in and saying, no, we got it all right. We were, right at, but being able to talk to somebody who disagrees with him, who has reasons for pushing back against mask mandates, for example. He honors your relationship over a very deeply held belief that, that y'all are on the opposite sides of. But it gives him an opportunity to break out of his own bespoke reality. Right.
Right.
And I think he's done the same for you. These types of relationships are invaluable, man. We can see, instead of just like those 3 blind men who are touching one part of the elephant, we got a picture of the whole elephant. You know that story, right? Where one guy's like, it's a rope, because he's touching the tail, the fuzzy part of the tail.
Yep.
One guy's like, it's a mountain, because he's touching the side of it. The other guy's touching the trunk, and they're describing their bespoke reality because that's all that they know. But if we break out of the bespoke reality, we could see the whole elephant. So, or donkey.
No, that's exactly right. And when we get stuck in our silos, or that's another thing Moni Guzman talks a lot about is getting stuck in our own silos, right? Or I've had several conversations with people about confirmation bias. You talked about, we only see things that confirm our own beliefs because I don't care, and I don't care whether it's Fox News or it's CNN or it's name any one of the talking heads that you can find throughout talk radio or the cable news stations. We often find ourselves getting stuck in the same feedback loop that or echo chamber, because we want to feel comfortable in our own beliefs. So why would we step outside? Not me. I step outside my comfort zone all the time in these conversations, but people do, right? They want what's comfortable. They want what they know. They don't want to, go feeling around and take the chance of somebody shattering their perception of whatever this particular thing is, and that's, the talk in politics and religion too. So, when we think about those 2 things, right, those are 2 things within our life that we find ourselves getting very emotionally charged over, right, Corey? I mean, politics are me as a Christian, and I know you're a born again Christian as well. And the idea trying to have a conversation with somebody who, who may not believe as we do, that Jesus Christ died for our sins and rose from the dead, and this thing, that thing, to try and have a conversation with somebody that is going to try and shatter that belief would be a very difficult thing, right? And then those conversations, then once we know it's true, once our emotions as human beings, our emotions start to rise, our cognitive ability to continue that conversation in a reasonable way decreases. So, that's one of those things where people have to be very, very comfortable in their own skin and have that ability to, separate the emotion from that conversation sometimes in order to say and do that reasonable thing, right? Well, what is it about your life experience that brought us or brought you to believe as you do here? Because that's interesting to me. It's not something that I'm going to necessarily agree with. And I'm not going to try and change your mind, and you're probably not going to change mine, but I would sure love to figure out where this comes from and how you got there.
Yeah. It's a really good point, the way that you just put it, because what you do, I had a buddy of mine from that I graduated high school with. We grew up in Central Jersey together. He's a strong Trump supporter. I think he was curious about DeSantis for a bit, but he's like strong Trump supporter. So he came on the show and we had a conversation. And at the end, he said something kind of, you'd miss it if you weren't listening. But to me, it was very profound. And it was basically like, thanks for hearing me.
Yeah.
Not like, hey, this is a great talk. Good seeing you. It was like, thanks for hearing me. Thanks for listening to me, because I think John, my buddy John, he gets stronger in his beliefs and he comes out swinging because he's gotten rhetorically beat up a lot just for having his views and daring to share his views. We disagree on a lot. Obviously, I'm not a Trump fan, but not obviously. I happen to not be a Trump fan, if you couldn't tell already.
Okay.
But
yeah, I did pick that up on some of the clips that I've seen from you and whatnot, which is totally cool. I mean, whatever. That's what you are. That's what you are.
Yeah, but my buddy John is, and he gets. It's a tendency. It's a proclivity for people to start beating him up. Because he doesn't feel seen as a human being. He doesn't feel respected as a human being. So regardless of how much I disagree with him on that particular politician, I still love him. He's my buddy. He's my buddy,
right.
So if I could do nothing else, and listen, I'm not going to convince him about, how he feels about crime in liberal blue cities or whatever. I'm not going to convince him. He's just watching different shows than I am and has different inputs than I do. But more than anything, I wanted John to know that I hear him and I see him and I love him anyway.
Well, and you know what, Corey, that is the most beautiful thing and one of the most effective things that you can do. I mean, I've had a number of conversations with a good friend of mine, Angel Eduardo, talks about star manning and really being able to receive somebody's position on a particular topic and repeat it back to them in a way that they would agree that you totally understand. You totally heard what they said. And what that does is it kind of goes back to something I said a little bit earlier. It really breaks down that total thing. You talked about your friend. He comes out swinging, right? Because he's already in his mind built this scenario in his head as to how that conversation's going to go.
Yeah.
But the best,
and rightfully so, by the way, rightfully so. He's got the experience where he's already been beaten up for it, or rhetorically beaten up for it.
Beaten up. And this isn't exclusive to any one side of politics or any one side of the religious conversation either anymore. I mean, one of the reasons that I ever started paying attention to politics, Corey, and I don't know if you've heard me talk about this before, but one of the reasons I ever started paying attention to politics before, because I had zero interest for the vast majority of my life. I mean, I was in my 30s before I ever even started even paid any attention. Most of the time, couldn't have told you anything. Couldn't have told you a single thing about any president. But the only reason I ever started paying attention to politics was because of the nasty and just the vile, that venomous hatred that I heard people talking about President Bush after 9/11. Okay. Or not necessarily right after 9/11, but once the patriotism where Americans were all getting together, once all that kind of wore off after first year or two and whatnot, and just the venomous hatred that I would hear from people about Bush, and I'm just like, I'm listening and the stuff that I had always heard about Bush, and I'm like, I how do you hate this guy? I mean, he's like a cool dude, and so that's when I started paying attention to politics. And then over the past, so whatever that was, okay, so say 20 years now, whatever it's been, I've seen it become more and more toxic, and we become more and more divided, and people are no longer having discussions, but they're talking past each other. Because just like your friend, you're talking about your friend John and how he comes out swinging right away, and rightfully so, because he's used to that metaphorical beating that he's going to take from the people that he's having that conversation with. I've been there. I've gave the metaphorical beatings and I've taken them. I've changed my ways. I don't like that anymore. Now I work towards the depolarization, the actual having conversations where people do hear each other. Because one of the worst things that you can do to a person, and one of the best ways that you can ensure that a person will not receive your message, is to show them that you're not receiving theirs.
Yeah. Are there certain not rules, but like parameters that you try to abide by in order to create better circumstances for healthier conversations?
One of the first things that I try to do, Corey, in these situations now is, just like I talked about, with my friend Angel Eduardo, talking about really receiving that message and then repeating it back to them as if, so they know that you heard what they actually said. So repeat it back to them in a way, try to restate their position in a way that they would agree conveys the message that they were trying to convey.
That's actually something that Brooksy talks about in his latest book.
How to know
Brooks
a person.
Talks about how to know a
Yeah.
person. Like active listening, reflecting back to someone as faithfully as you can. That's a good exercise. I forgot about that, but that's a really important exercise.
It's an incredibly important exercise, because one of the worst things that you can do, and I did read that book by David Brooks about how to know a person and having these deep and meaningful conversations with people, but the biggest thing about that is, how do we make sure that this person doesn't feel invisible, that they don't, that we aren't robbing them of who they are and completely dismissing their position. In a conversation I had with my friend Jonathan Rausch, and I know you've talked to him as well, but
I just saw him on Saturday, actually. Yeah.
Oh, did you?
I just saw
Nice.
John on Saturday. Yeah. I was in DC, so we spent a couple hours. I saw Pete Wehner first, who was one of Bush's chief speechwriters. And then after that, I was late to the Roush meeting because Pete said, he was joking around. He said, because I'm more important than Roush. You could tell him that. So, yeah, we spent a good couple hours. It was awesome seeing him. I love that.
Nice. Dude. Very cool. Very cool. But the thing that him and I were talking a lot about, right, is kill our errors, not our enemies, and not that I want to believe that people who think differently than me are my enemies, because I do not. And even people that don't agree with me politically, but we need to and I bring that up as an example, but just because somebody believes a certain way or thinks differently than we do, they are not necessarily our enemies, and their position is what we should be attacking, not the person themselves. You know, if we can truly prove to a person, Corey, that we see them and see the humanity in them and see them for who they are as another human being that has, that has emotions and has, has that common humanity. And this is another thing that just came out in the episode, in a recent episode here, the D-Rate the Hate podcast, my friends from the Pro-Human Foundation. One of the best and most important ways for us to have, those deep and meaningful conversations with people is to really, show people that we understand that humanity. We share this common humanity with them. And even if, switching gears back to the positions thing, even if somebody has different positions than us, we don't attack those people as a person. We attack the position that they have on a particular issue. And the Pro-Human Foundation isn't attacking anybody for anything. I'm just saying, I'm combining, I guess,
that's all right,
thoughts in my head right now. But the reality is we have to see each person for who they are, see that common humanity that we all have. If somebody has different positions than we have, we need to really show them that we are taking in what their position is, make sure they understand that we see what their position is, and then attack that position, not attack the person. I think, when going back to what we were talking about before, talking about politics and religion, having those conversations, because people do, whether it be your religion, people attach that and make that a core part of their identity, or now, and I think it's a toxic philosophy, but now people attaching their political beliefs as part of their core identity. They have a hard time separating that when we attack those political positions, or we show somebody that we don't necessarily agree with their religious theology. They take that as an attack on their personal identity, their core identity. Once they feel attacked, just like your friend John, they start swinging.
Yeah,
and when they start swinging, their ears go shut. And they don't hear anything anymore.
You don't hear anything anymore. Yeah, no, it's a really good point. I've tried to separate out that when, for example, when I do criticize Trump, some of my buddies who are Trump supporters take it personally as if I'm talking about them. I'm like, dude, I know you've been faithful to your wife, for example. Like, so I'm not talking about you. Like, I am not talking about you. Especially when I bring in scripture for some of my buddies from church who are Trump fans, when I say he's on the wrong side of the equation of the fruit of the spirit, I know like good friends of mine, like really, but they do exude the fruit of the spirit. They are on the right side of the equation. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, So I need to do a better job, I think, to your point about making sure that I'm being clear about that if I'm talking about whether it's Trump or some other position, that I'm not talking about them. I think what you said, kill our errors, not our enemies, so that's how do I do that better? How do I do that better? When I am, since we're talking about Trump, so when I am talking about Trump, making sure that my buddy John or whoever, my friends from church, that they know that I'm not talking about them. Are there certain things that, whether it's me or just folks tend to do, that would make somebody like John more defensive and feel like I'm talking about him? Or is there certain things I can do when I'm talking about it to remind them and be more specific in my critiques, or just, I don't want to avoid it altogether. We got to talk about it. Right. But what do you think about that?
Because I mean, that's the thing, Corey, is and that's I think that's a lot of the reason why we got to where we are today with the whole Trump phenomenon and so I'm just going to toss this in there. I think there's like two very weird dynamics with Trump, right? I think you've got TDS on one side, the Trump derangement syndrome on one side, and then you've got TMS which I'm going to coin that because I don't think anybody else has said it yet. But the Trump messianic syndrome, right?
Oh, okay.
On the other
I
side.
like it. I'm going to steal that from you, man.
Yeah, you can use it, man. But the thing is I think it's very weird on both sides, right? People there's certain people that think this guy is legitimately the devil and can do no right. And then there's certain people that think that Trump is the Messiah and Trump can do no wrong. And then there's people like me that are right in the middle, and I'm just like, I don't like this guy, but if I have to choose that or the left wing lunacy that I believe, I don't like to use that word, but just this uber left wing platform that seems to be absorbing so much of my personal life right now. I know which one I'm going to pick, and I don't want to because I can't stand it. So, yeah. But I think there's really these two dynamics, right? The Trump derangement syndrome, the Trump messianic syndrome. You've got both of those, and then there's a whole bunch of people right in the middle that are just disgusted by the idea that we even have to be having this conversation right now. But the important thing is that the conversation has to be had because it was the idea, and this is my opinion, but it's the idea that the conversations were not being had that got us here in the first place. Because what happened was there's so many people out there, Corey, who did not feel heard. They felt invisible. They felt that they did not have a champion and nobody was speaking for them. And that is the worst thing that you can do, because then all of a sudden you had a whole section of the population who did not become engaged until they became enraged. And once they're enraged, you and I both know that the emotions are running way too high. The cognitive ability to make good decisions is gone way down. And now we are where we are. Now, that is all said to say this about, having those conversations with people like your buddy John and things. The best thing that we can try to do, and any of us that are, married, and you never want to say, "Oh, honey, calm down. You're being irrational," or things like that, right?
You're being hysterical.
Yeah. Do you really? No. But anyways, no. Getting to my point though is the biggest thing. I don't care what kind of conversation we're having or who we're having it with. The worst thing that we can do to a person in a conversation is to make them feel like they are not heard or their message has no value. So while we may believe that everything that person had to say was completely off base, has no validity whatsoever, does not make any sense, the worst thing that we can do and the fastest way we can ensure that person does not receive any of our message is to show them that their message meant nothing to us.
So it all goes back to what you were saying before. Restate their position, make sure, the best that you can is faithful in rendering, just make like the best thing we could do is make somebody feel like they were heard. So I guess it all comes back to that, like being able to, somebody wants to be recognized. Somebody wants to feel like they're a human being as opposed to being invisible and inconsequential. So that's a really good, that's a good reminder. If we do nothing else, then, we can remember somebody's humanity. So it's a really good reminder.
Well, it's one of the reasons that I talk so much about this thing that plagues our country right now, this identitarianism thing, or to go to a book that I just read recently, The Identity Trap by Yasha Monk.
Yeah.
One of the worst things that we can do to another human being is make them feel unseen, unheard, invalid. And the fastest way to do that is, we see it so often in this country today where people put people in these boxes and then they label them. And then there's these predisposed, we've got this, people think that just because this person is in this box, or we've placed that person in that box. They're all a monolith. They all think exactly the same way, and so we go into the conversation, and this is something I talked about with the folks from the Pro Human Foundation. We go into that conversation already believing we already have made up our mind as to what that person believes or what that person thinks or whatever. We have to have our minds open, our ears, our hearts open when we have that conversation with that person. We need to battle ourselves going into each conversation too, because each of us has our own internal bias. Going way back to another conversation I had with a gal a couple of years ago named Jessica Nordell, and has an unconscious bias. I mean, we have these biases within us that are truly unconscious. But we have to work through those when we have those conversations too, because just like you and your friend John, right? Now you're I don't know if you want to call yourself a vehement anti-Trumper or whatever, but you don't like Trump. I get it, right? But does that affect your conversation when you start the conversation with, because we already know he's going to come out swinging if he feels unheard.
Yeah.
But are your ears open? Is your heart, your mind open walking into that conversation with somebody that is a Trump supporter? So it does go both ways, because like I said, we talked about your elephant story or just being that confirmation bias.
Right.
We want to engage in things that we are comfortable with, that are going to confirm our own beliefs, our own things. So when you're having a conversation with somebody that disagrees with you, are you having those same internal feelings that are going to prevent you from receiving their message? So
yeah, for sure. I mean, I do have certain barriers that are set up, partly just because I've been in the thick of it too, and I've gotten my ass kicked too. So I do have certain barriers set up, but I get into the conversation because, again, I think it's important that we talk about it. And I get into the conversation because I don't have all the answers, So talking to somebody, for example, I have family in Israel. I grew up Jewish. My cousins are in Israel. 8 or 9 of the kids between 18 and 30 been called up to the IDF. I feel very strongly about it. But having a friend who has more sympathy for Palestinians, in particular Palestinian civilians, that's healthy for me to be able to talk to her. And by the way, I'm thinking of a good friend of mine named Lisa Sharon Harper, who right after October 7th, she feels very strongly about how that's happened. She does think that a genocide is taking place. I don't agree with her. I strongly disagree with her, obviously, that we have a right to exist. But here's the thing. We didn't talk about that right away. When the first talk that we had about Israel, my sister, she's not my sister, she's a dear, dear friend. My sister asked me, I think of her as my sister. Because she's a Christian as well. She said, "How you doing? How you doing, brother? How you doing?" She's African American, so she had gone through mourning processes over the last few years when Black bodies have been brutalized, right? So it's not the same, but there's similarities enough for her to know that her brother was hurting. So her first question wasn't like, "How do you feel now?" Or like coming out swinging, if you will. Her first question was, "How you doing, brother? You all right?" And she just sat with me, and my head was like mashed potatoes. I was in a state that I couldn't articulate how I was feeling. But there were some things that I was saying that I knew she disagreed with, like the whole idea of the concept of colonizers. When people from my family got there, I have great uncles who were Zionists way before Israel was ever formed. Before World War I, even they were passionate Zionists in that movement that eventually led to Israel being formed after World War II. But when they got there, when Srulik got there, he was escaping the Bolshevik Revolution. He was escaping being recruited into Tsar's army. He was escaping Cossacks rampaging through their town and burning it down. I'm like, this does not a colonizer make, So we had disagreements.
No, it is not.
But we've learned from each other, partly because she cares about me first. We still disagree on a lot, but we've had healthy conversations. I've talked to a Palestinian professor whose family has been in Jerusalem for generations. So I've learned about what they've experienced as a family through his point of view. That's good. He's, so I think those conversations are good, but the point is that Lisa valued me as a human being and what I was going through in the mourning process that we were going through.
So important.
So that was, so on a much, similarly, I love Yasha's book, Yasha Monk's book, The Identity Trap. It kind of goes to a theme that we've been picking up on here a couple times. I thought that his book was the most effective criticism of whatever you want to call it, identity politics, wokeism, for a number of reasons. One is Yasha is left of center. If not, I wouldn't say he's far left, but I would say he's definitely left of center, and he would describe himself that way too. So.
Sure.
Criticizing
he does in the book, right? I mean, he talks about him he's a classic liberal, I think, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. So criticizing folks that he identifies more closely with is a much more effective criticism from the start. But also the way that he did that book, he didn't just, mischaracterize Ibram X. Kendi's work, for example, or the 1619 Project. I think that he did what you're talking about. Give each of these scholars or each of these pieces of work that are advocating for being woke, if you want to call it that. He gave it a fair rendering, right? He started with a fair rendering of Ibram X. Kendi's work or other scholars' work, and then he would criticize it. But he would criticize it based on a fair rendering of if he was having an academic conversation with one of those other scholars, he did it in such a way where I think they would say, yes, that's a fair treatment. That's a fair summary of what I was advocating for. But from there, then he's able to criticize it that much more effectively. So I think that that book, The Identity Trap, is going to be, it's going to turn out to be one of those books like Rausch's book, The Constitution of Knowledge, that we're going to be talking about for years and years to come.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think identitarianism, if that's what you want to call it. I mean, I know there was a different definition of identitarianism for quite some time, but yeah, I don't care whether you want to call it identitarianism or identity politics, or I know Yasha uses the word identity synthesis in the book.
Yeah.
The identity synthesis. It is most definitely a poison that is leading to greater polarization in this country and leading to just leading to a greater divide between so many people. And like I said, once you have locked somebody into that position of being part of an identity group, and now you have taken away part of that person's individual core identity because you've stuck them, you've pigeonholed them into something that they may or may not. I mean, they may, but they may or may not have any real, commonalities with the thinking of or the positions of a lot of the other people within that group, and that's where it bothers me so much, is because we go back to that idea of becoming invisible, right, Corey? I mean, the worst thing that you can do is make somebody feel invisible, feel unheard, and I think, from my personal experience, the things that I have seen most and believe the most about that whole concept is, once they're dropped in that bucket, people believe that all the people in that bucket are some kind of monolith. And then now there's these preconceived notions as to how this conversation is going to go with that particular person. And so much is lost. Number one, a lot of the conversations are lost. They just don't happen anymore because they've already divided us, right? We've already started out in, as being divided. But then if the conversation can get started, we've got so much more work to do to bridge that divide because there's already that unconscious bias. There's already this preconceived notion as to how this person is going to interact. How is this person going to receive what I'm saying? Am I going to be able to fully receive what they're saying? And that toxicity is a bad footing on which to start.
Yeah. No, it is a tendency to know one data point about somebody, whether it's the shade of my skin or the color of my hair or, what genitalia I have or, whatever. And then to maybe create an entire narrative about my life and my story. And that's, we're not doing anybody any favors when we do that. Or, just knowing one thing and assuming that a person's going to act a certain way. If I know somebody's a Trump, wears a red hat, I might jump to the conclusion, oh, well, they're going to be, they're going to be rude or they're going to be loud or they're going to be obnoxious or they're going to be dumb or they're going to be that's a tendency that we all got to recognize. Again, the first step is admitting it. I am part of the problem, So if I could admit that and recognize it when I'm doing it and then allow that person to clear the brush of my assumptions, so that I can see them more clearly, that's, I'm willing to do that work. Where I start to get frustrated is when I find myself having to go back. Like if it's somebody that I have a number of conversations with or somebody that I consider a friend, and then we keep on having to circle back to wrong assumptions. That's where I have, I wouldn't say I cut off relationships, but that's something that maybe I should develop more patience for, that I do get frustrated about. Cause I don't expect to change somebody's vote. I don't expect to change somebody's position on a position or a piece of legislation. But I expect them, if we're talking multiple times, I expect them to remember me as I am trying to remember. I'll give you an example. So, a buddy of mine he calls himself a really strong Second Amendment guy. I didn't grow up with guns, so it's not my top issue for me.
Sure.
But I learned that part of it for him, this dude's name is Darren, part of it for him is it was a bonding time for him and his dad. His dad is veteran, or was it, may he rest in peace. So for him, it's very close to home for him, quite literally. So I got it. I understand. I'm not going to make him keep on having to correct the record about assumptions that any number of people can make if somebody says I'm a big Second Amendment guy. I'd like the same favor. I'd like the same favor returns. You know what I mean? So.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Just
no. And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's when we're having these conversations and I can't remember, I can't remember who the conversation was with, and it could have been a couple different people with a common theme. But one of the things that we've talked about is, not everything not every conversation needs to be had, and not every time is the right time for every conversation.
Yeah.
So when you think about it that way, it's like, okay, I keep on circling back to the same thing, and we keep on, we keep on trying to have this conversation, and every time we do, we're charging through the same minefields and hitting the same mines. This is ridiculous, And I think a lot of that really comes down to the idea, Corey, that not every conversation has to be had at all times.
Yeah.
So and sometimes it's just a matter of, okay, did we get too deep here, or can we work through this piecemeal, and maybe we don't get to our conclusion or a common ground or the place that we want to get right now, but maybe we can get a couple steps closer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point where The only thing I want isn't necessarily convince somebody, but to earn the right to come back. You know,
That's
so
awesome.
even if somebody asks me a question or challenges me on something, it's not only okay to say I don't know. It's actually a door opener to say I don't know. See, because you could say that's a really important question. I feel like we need to talk about that, but I don't know. I don't have strong feelings about that. But will you give me a week to like read up on that, and let's circle back and talk about it again? You know,
That's
because
right.
because
Yeah.
that's, I mean, you're humanizing yourself. You're not pretending to be the expert on everything at all times, but also it is prioritizing relationship over the contest, you know, relationship over debate. It becomes less transactional and more relational. And I think that's ultimately what breaks the fever. We're in a fever right now. We're in a sickness right now as a culture,
Yeah.
you know, but I think that coming back and prioritizing relationship is one of the main things that breaks the fever.
And there's something you said there, Corey, that I want to key on because I want to make sure people caught it too. Not every conversation needs to be a contest, you know,
Right.
and we've lost that.
Yeah.
We've lost that in a lot of our society. Is not every conversation needs to be a contest. There doesn't have to be a winner and a loser
Right.
in every, you know, conversation. It's one of these things where it's I think that's where we've broken down. It's really one of the things that hurts us about a society and has really damaged this social compact that we all have is you know, it's not about winners and losers. Sometimes it's really just about it's just about being able to have the conversation and here's another guy that I'm sure you'll know. His name is Daniel Darling.
Oh,
we
yeah,
were,
sure.
We were, you know, him and I were having a conversation and like he said, it's, you know, maybe, you know, maybe we don't have the conversation at all because we know it's not the right time, but maybe we do have the conversation and just realize, you know what? Hey, it's, you know, we're probably not going to agree on this and that's fine. And at least, you know, I know your position, you know, my position, and we're probably not going to come to that common ground, but we can walk away with an understanding that, you know, we're just going to differ. And that's,
Yeah.
you know, it's not about winning and losing. It's about having, sometimes it's about just having the conversation. So
yeah. And Dan's been through the ringer, man. He's, you know, he got canceled by the NRB, the religious broadcasters that he was a part of. So I have a lot of respect for that guy. He was
awesome.
one of the first guys that said yes to come on our show when we first started. In
is that right?
2020.
Nice.
Yeah. It was really cool of him to come on. And I think he was in the midst of him like going through the thick of that. So I have a lot of respect for his journey and his integrity. So good dude.
Very good dude. Very good dude. Well, Corey, you know what, our missions are so closely aligned. We've got so many common friends. We do a lot of the same stuff, and I'm certainly honored to call you a friend. And this conversation could go on and on and on. So that just tells me we're going to have more conversations in the future, without a doubt. So,
well, Wilk,
tell me,
before we go, man, like I got to say, like if I'm up in Minnesota or you're down in SoCal, I know it's colder by you than it is by me. So you have a place here. I'll show you where the good sushi is in SoCal, a good Mexican restaurant.
nice.
We got to do this like in person at some point, man. I feel like there's much more conversations to be had. So
there's a lot more conversations. There's definitely going to be some collaboration. I see that in our future. Corey, Nathan, it's been an incredible conversation here. Looking forward to more. Just tell me real quick, or tell the DTH listeners, what's the best way to find you? Where can they get more from Corey, Nathan?
Oh, I appreciate that. So you can find me online. I'm on 4 socials, the meta socials, Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. I'm also on LinkedIn a lot. I'm not really checking Twitter anymore, but every once in a while I'll drop in there. They're all at Corey S. Nathan. So it's Corey. It's Corey with an E. And then my middle initial is S as in Sam or Scott, Nathan. So at Corey S. Nathan. The podcast, Talk of Politics and Religion without killing each other. You can look it up on any app. The trick is don't put a G at the end of talking or killing. So it's talking, Talkin apostrophe, politics, and it'll come up. Or our website is politicsandreligion.us.
Very cool, my friend. Well, it was great talking to you, Corey, and look forward to many more conversations in the future. Corey Nathan, talking politics and religion.
That's right.
Without killing each other.
There you go, Will. Thanks so much, man. This is fun.
We'll see you again, my friend. Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends, share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the Derate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.